Rev up your engines. Today I got a 2002 Chevy Tahoe. It failed the inspection, so the customer brought it over here. The yearly inspection, all your lights have to work. Third eye brake lights don't work, the LED brake lights. So first thing we're gonna do is fix that. Now if you like me and you work by yourself, get a long screwdriver, then open the door. Then get the screwdriver, put it on the brake, and make the electric seat go forward. That will push the brake light on. So then we go to the back, we can see the left brake light's on. The right brake light's on, but the third brake light up here isn't lighting on at all. Now, unfortunately, this third brake light assembly doesn't have bulbs in it. It's all LED, so you can't take it apart and just put a new bulb in. You got about the whole thing if it's bad. So before you waste any money, check to see if you got any power back here. So the first thing we do is unscrew the assembly and pull it out, and there's the power supply. So we'll unplug it here, and then we'll check the power. Now realize the battery's in the front, so that's why I like these testing devices like this that have a really long cable. You connect it to the battery, power to positive, ground to negative, and as you can see now, the device has power. 12 volts, when you turn it on, that means it's working. It's just got such a long cord, we can walk the whole way to the back of the vehicle and not have any problem with it reaching. And if you notice, these keep falling down because the support rods are wearing out. We're going to change them later, but for now, we can use a rake. And we'll stick the other end up on the trunk so that holds it up. Since both the left and the right brake lights are working, that means there's no fuse problem because the third brake light up here uses the same fuse assembly. So we're going to test for power up here now. And that's easy to do. We check one side, it's got 11.6 volts, that's good enough. And we check the other side, it's green, it's got ground. So that means the LED array is bad. Here's the new one. We'll plug it in just to see what happens. And as you can see, that's the problem. Now it lights up. So then we just remove this rubber jacket off an old one. It just pops out of the stupid hole. No one knows why they make them these ways, but hey. Then the new one just pops into the rubber part, just like the old one did. Kind of stupid design, but hey, that's GM for you. Then we have to wiggle the assembly in. It's not an easy job, but with a little wiggling and pushing, you can see it's starting to go in. Then we just screw it back in. In it goes. And now we have all three working brake lights. Now it's a shame you just can't buy bulbs, but it's an LED array. They burn out on these GM things, so you got to replace the whole expensive assembly. That's just the way it goes with GM. Now we're going to deal with the trunk falling down. The struts that hold them up have to be replaced in pairs because they're so weak. If you change one and the other's weak, it'll still fall down. So we're going to change both of them out. Now here the whole weight of the trunk's going to be held up, so rather than my flimsy rake, I've gone with my heavy duty broom. The broom's a lot more stable. It's going to hold up while I take it apart. The last thing you want when you're working is a giant trunk coming and hitting you in the head. I had it happen, yes. Maybe that's the way I am, I don't know. Now the trick here is these little clips. There's little clips in here, and you got to pry the clip out to get it off. Now to get it on, they just slam on, so it doesn't matter. But to get them off, you got to pry the clips off. Start on the bottom here. We don't care if it scratches the old one because we're throwing it away anyways. There, now we got the clip off. Then the whole thing just pries off. Off it comes. You can use whatever you want, but I like these little pry bars. They have V's in them. They're really great for prying stuff off. Now we do the same thing on the top. We gotta pry off that, get it out of the way. Off it comes. And just snaps on because it opens when you put it on. As you can see, you just put it over and snaps it on. Then you get the bottom side, and guess what? Just do the same thing. There it is. Now that side's done. The crucial thing is a giant broom holding it up. Since there's no tension on them, it's easy to do. If you try doing it without jacking that up in the air, you're going to be holding and pulling. Now, you're going to have a friend hold it up while you do it, but I'm working by myself with no friends. So we just repeat the process here, pull it off, then go to the top and do the same thing. Off it comes. Then we snap the top one on, and snap the bottom one on. That's it. Now you can remove the broom, and voila! It stays up in the air. It'll close, and then when you open it, it'll stay open. You notice it's actually opening itself now instead of me having to do it by hand. So now you know how to fix these things on your vehicle, and I'll bet you dollars to donuts you had no idea I was going to use a broom to do it. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Madman says, is the car done for? as soon as it's flooded. I'm thinking about moving to Houston, and I'm worried about buying a flooded car. Well, here's the thing. Unfortunately, they're not necessarily done right away. If it's seriously flooded, like over the dash, generally you're never even going to run again. But if somebody gets them running, it's an insidious process of a car being flooded with a modern car that has all the electronics and computers on it. It's not like when I was a young mechanic and the only thing it had was a carburetor. The insidious thing about flooding is sometimes it can take years to do all of its damage. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had a customer tow me a Volkswagen, and I'm working on this thing for hours, and every time I get something working, the car still wouldn't run. Other things would be wrong. So he came over, and I said, look, you know, your car's driving me nuts. And he said, oh, didn't I tell you 3 years ago, water came in through the windows. It got that deep, and I just changed all the fluids and dried the electronics with a hairdryer and drove it away. Well, I said, now you're not going to drive it away. You're going to tow it to the junkyard because it's not worth anything. All the electronics, after 3 years, all corroded. The computer modules, of which cars have many of them these days, started to go bad, and it wasn't worth fixing. So you never want to mess with a flooded car. You know, a car had been flooded, don't even think about buying it. It would be a foolhardy thing, because it isn't necessarily, oh, it made it through the flood and it's fine. It could be years later that it comes and bites you in the rear end. Franco says, Scotty, I got a Hyundai Sonata basic model. I noticed it smells like something burning when I park. The most common thing for any car, Hyundai, doesn't matter what it is the valve cover on the top of the engine. That seals the valve to let oil flow inside the top on the cams, but not get out. It'll often leak a little, and the oil will seep down, and then it will get on the exhaust manifold and start to smolder. And that's when you're going to smell it. So open hood, and if you see the valve cover gasket on the top of the engine, and you look right under it, and you see there's oil around it, that means it's leaking. It just needs replacing. That's a very simple thing. Pray it's not the head gasket starting to leak, because the head gasket will do the same thing. It can leak on the outside and drip on the exhaust and smell, and that's a very expensive job. I mean, a valve cover gasket, sometimes you can change those things for $70, $80 or do it yourself and buy a $15 gasket. But a head gasket, no. That's thousands in a modern car. So pray it's just a valve cover gasket leaking. It usually is. Palatino says, Scotty, what do you think about buying a 92 Mercedes 300E with 162,000 miles for $2,000? I think you're insane. And here's why. I had a customer bought a 300E, right? Problem after problem after problem after problem. And I said, why did you buy this thing? He bought his for $2,000. He said, well, I wanted a Mercedes and it looks nice. Yeah, it looked nice. Do a little research and see how many previous people owned this car. Well, granted, the car was like 12 years old. Turns out it had 13 previous owners. Now, unlucky 13, right? If you ever find a car like that, run away. I don't even care what kind of car it is. If it's had 13 previous owners, it's obviously got problems. You don't want to mess with it. And the 300Es, they were horrendous vehicles. They had all kinds of problems to begin with, and you don't want to mess with a car. It doesn't matter. You think that's a good price for a Mercedes. No, it isn't. It's a money pit, and you'll keep throwing money into it. Now, I mean, if you really have to have a Mercedes, there are better ones out there you can find in that price range. Don't buy that particular one, because that's one of the worst they ever made. KNY51 says, Scotty, I got an 06 Eddie Bauer Ford Explorer with 196,000 miles. There's antifreeze leak around the thermostat. Could I put some kind of sealer in it? Now, don't even bother, because, see, those things, they're made out of plastic. Everything's too cheap now. The housing's made out of plastic, and they just crack. So go to like AutoZone, and they sell aftermarket plastic assemblies that aren't all that expensive, and just replace it, because you don't want it cracking further, because when those things finally crack, sometimes they crack big, and all the coolant leaks out all at once. And if you're on a highway and that happens, you could ruin your engine for some stupid little plastic part. So yeah, they were stinkers making it out of plastic, but just go buy the assembly at a place like AutoZone, any discount auto store, and replace it. You can replace it yourself. They bolt on and off. They aren't kind of a plain pain in the butt area to get to, but it can be done when the engine's cold, so you don't burn your hands. Replace it. Don't try a sealer on that, because the plastic crap just cracks and breaks, and the sealer, even if it stopped the leak for a short time, it's plastic that's cracking. It'll crack somewhere else, so just replace it. Get B says, Scotty, I got an 01 Chrysler Sebring convertible 2.7, nice condition, but have an issue with the oil light coming on. That's one of the worst engines they ever made, that 2.7 liter V6 engine. Those are horrendous engines, absolutely horrendous engines. And if your oil light is coming on, first thing, change the oil pressure sending unit. Pray it goes away. If it doesn't go away, then my advice is make the car go away. Get rid of it. That would mean that there's internal wear. Those engines are notorious for getting low oil pressure and for damaging the internal parts of the engine, requiring total overhauls. Now, it's 19 years old. I don't know how many miles you got on it, but if the oil pressure sending unit didn't fix it and the oil light would still come on, I would get rid of the car. I would not go any further, because rebuilding those engines cost a fortune. It may be a convertible, but still, it's a Chrysler Sebring convertible, and they're not worth a lot of money. It's not like it's a collector's items like a Mercedes convertible or a Mustang convertible. It's just an old Chrysler. Don't put too much money into that car. But if you change the oil pressure sending unit, it goes away, great. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.